my experience with sponsorship. And hopefully that will translate into some of y'all's experience and we can have a conversation here about it. So give me a second here and we'll get this going. My name's Sean, I'm an addict. So when I was asked to do this, originally it was going to be on service. So I got all prepared to talk to you all about service. And then they told me a couple weeks ago that it was going to be on sponsorship. And I went, shit, I can think of 100 other people to sponsor you other than me. My sobriety date is October 1st, 2006. I got sober in Birmingham, Alabama. And it's funny how I came to Birmingham, Alabama. I'm originally from Los Angeles. And I hopped on a plane and flew to Birmingham, convinced that they weren't using dope in the South. And true story. And I got to the South, y'all, and I found out that they've been having a party in the South for about 500 years. And I hit bottom in the South. I did. And in the end, I'm just going to qualify a little bit. In the end, for me, this kid that grew up on the coast out west, I wound up with a one-tooth guy named Midget that drove a John Deere lawnmower, and and he was a grave digger. Now, you can't make that shit up, right? And we smoked crack, right? And look, I love my heroin addict friends. In fact, I love opiates, right? I do. I love alcohol. In fact, if it changes my mindset and the way that I feel, I have used it, right? The first time I used it was a spiritual experience, right? It fixed. Sandy B talks about that what this ism really is I just missed the hell out of God. Teeth almost fell out. Now you know I'm a drug addict. I missed the hell out of God, right? And the first time I used this thing actually fixed me on the inside. But cocaine will make you do some shit, y'all, right? Cocaine will have you stealing from yourself, right? There's a flat screen TV. I paid $1,000 for it. I bet you we can get $200 for it right now, right? Crazy shit like that. In the end, I lost my wife and my children and all of the things. And I think it's important to note that I've worked in the treatment of addictions for 30 years. I've only been sober for 18. You guys do the math, right? Because I can talk to you guys about your frontal cortex and the nature of addiction, but that didn't spell out the necessary vital spiritual experience that's required to overcome addiction. Y'all feel me? Right? And I went to 16 treatment centers before I got sober. And I'd go there and they'd go, "God, 90, get you a sponsor," right? They tell us that shit. And we show up at these groups and nobody ever takes the time to tell us what the hell a sponsor is. What we usually do is we say, "Hey, John, tell us what sponsorship is." And John says, "A sponsor is a guide through the 12 steps of Cocaine Anonymous. And if you don't have one, get one," right? Well, I don't know about y'all, but when I showed up and they said that shit, I went, "I ain't got one and I ain't getting one. Peace." And my car would magically drive right from the meeting to the dope man every time. Bill Wilson talks about in the beginning of sponsorship that he wanted this thing to be about the Webster's Dictionary definition of it is to take responsibility for someone. We have a responsibility to the newcomer who comes in the room. Are you taking responsibility for the newcomer? I know some days, let's face it, you get some time, you start to forget what it was like to have your ass falling off. But the intent was that we would pull people outside and we would talk to them about sponsorship. If we didn't know how to find a sponsor, we would connect somebody with a sponsor. My first sponsor that actually worked the 12 steps with me, I didn't have enough gumption to even know how to do it. I was so beaten down. I'd asked a guy once in Laguna Beach, dude, will you grab me some water? I'm so dry, and Ripley's don't believe it. First guy I ever asked to sponsor me was a guy named Tim out in Laguna Beach, California. And I went up to Tim. We all want that sponsor who's cool. Y'all know the guy in the room that like drops some heavy shit. You're like, this guy's going to be my sponsor, right? And I went up to Tim and I said, hey, dude, will you sponsor me? And it took everything in me to ask that guy to sponsor me. And Tim said, yeah, call me on Tuesday. Now, that was a Sunday. I didn't call Tim on Tuesday. Do you know what I'm talking about? And I stayed high for another 2 years. And that's not Tim's fault, right? That willingness thing inside of me hadn't happened. But my first real sponsor, his name was Dustin L. And when I say sponsor, I mean the first man that took responsibility for me in the Fellowship of Cocaine Anonymous on October 1st, 2006. I didn't have enough wherewithal to ask. A guy named Larry down in Birmingham looked at me and said, hey, this is Dustin. He's going to be your sponsor. Now, I had nothing in common with Dustin, right? And I know in the fellowship we talk about look for somebody who has something you want. And I've learned that more importantly, look for somebody who has something they want and go up and ask them how they got it, right? Dustin he's probably 8-10 years younger than me, had this long, you guys remember in the 2000s, that Hoover bang, my people from Atlanta may remember it. It was that hair that swooshed back on the back of his head. You know what I'm talking about? And I had nothing in common with Dustin. He was into this thing called Auburn football, and I didn't know anything about SEC football. Mark, my man Mark back there knows who I'm talking about. And Dustin put me into the big book of Alcoholics Anonymous. So no one had ever sat down and actually cracked open the big book of Alcoholics Anonymous, right? Sponsorship is about actually doing that. Do we do that? Do you sit down? Do you tell your sponsor on the first your sponsee on the first meeting when they say, hey, will you sponsor me? We usually say, are you willing to go to any lengths, right? And what does every new sponsee say? Right? Yeah, dude, of course, right? And then we usually follow it up with, call me, right? Call me, right? And how many of those people actually call us, right? I mean, what I've learned is I've had to give these people direction. So Dustin began to take me through these steps. I've had 3 different sponsors during my time in Cocaine Anonymous, and I think they've each been for a reason and a season, right? I have buried men that I've sponsored just because they, we have the could nots and the would nots. Just self took over and they made the supreme sacrifice and used and died. I have not got anybody sober, ever. Sometimes we like to be under this impression that somehow something I've done as a sponsor has got someone sober. You know what I'm talking about? And I'm proud. I sponsor 5 men and I'm like, look at them. They all have time and they're, right? But this is a God deal, right? My sponsor often tells me, he says, Sean, if you don't believe there's a higher power in Cocaine Anonymous, look at the guy or the gal. I just say gal, shit. Who's 90 days clean in the fellowship, doesn't have a sponsor, doesn't have a home group, and hasn't used dope. Y'all know what I'm talking about? And tell me that there's not a God. Something's going on with that person, right? So Dustin and I launched into the steps, and he outlined that we were going to start by looking at Bill's story, the first 8 pages, right? And in the first 8 pages, this is where Bill Wilson is actually getting high, right? And he told me, just look at it. You don't even have to understand the language. Underline what you identify with. And I went, okay, first 8 pages. Then like at page 9, this guy Ebby walks in. You guys know the story? Pretty amazing story. I didn't really love it till I was probably about 4 years sober, but it's a rad story. This guy Ebby walks in. He's got the starry-eyed look. Bill says he's had a spiritual awakening. We've seen it in our sponsees. You know what I'm talking about? That look where you're like, oh shit, dude is getting sober, right? That's an amazing thing. And I don't want to play it down because that I love that thing. I love Cocaine Anonymous and addicts. My life just keeps getting better as a result of this stupid little thing we do, which is help others. And then after page 8, Dustin told me to look at Bill's story again. And then we sat down and we reviewed it. And then we went into more about alcohol, or there is a solution. And then we went into more about alcoholism and the first page in We Agnostics. And then we discussed step 1. Y'all follow me? There were a lot of questions there. We talked about the strange mental twist, the allergy of the body, the phenomenon of craving that happens to me, you know, the thought preceding the first drink. I'm going to try to get a lot in here, right? Because this is my job as a sponsor. Can I convey this information, right? Funny story, Mark probably knows her. There's this wonderful woman. Her name is Miss Millie. She's in Selma, Alabama. She's probably been sober 150 years. She's rad. I mean, this chick, she's like the Oracle. You guys ever seen The Matrix? She's like this old, beautiful black woman, and she wears these glasses because she's got something going on with her eyes, you know? But she don't take no shit, right? And years ago, I was down in Mobile. And we were at a picnic, and she said, how many people you sponsoring? I said, Miss Millie, you know, I just don't have time, you know. I work and, you know, I'm sponsored 2 guys. And she said, who the fuck you think you is? Some type of counselor? She said, you think you're a teacher? She said, you sponsor men, Sean. And I was like, oh, shit, okay. And she taught me quick. I am not here to counsel my sponsees, despite my education being in behavioral health. I am not here to break down word for word or read each definition of what it means. What I'm here to do is to take my sponsees through the 12 steps of Alcoholics Anonymous, and hopefully within that time, I will be part of a small cog in taking his hand and putting it into the hand of a God of his understanding, right? And then just step out real slowly out of the room. And so I follow Miss Millie's guide when someone asks me to do this work with them. And if you guys are honest, you know, when a guy's willing or a woman's willing, it doesn't matter what you tell them, you know. I've told sponsees who are on step 2, they're like, what do I do next? I'm like, go dig up worms. They're like, okay. I'm like, don't call me till you got a worm and send me a screenshot of a worm. And they'll call. Willingness, right? Because the steps are a group of spiritual principles that, if practiced, can enable the sufferer to live happily and usefully whole. And it's my job as a sponsor to use the steps as a tool to show them those principles, you know, of hope, faith, courage, brotherly love, integrity. I don't need to go through all the principles with y'all right now. But, right? This is a responsibility that we have. Bill Wilson said that it was about leadership. In step 2, Dustin put me in We Agnostics, and we spent a lot of time. And I know a lot of people struggle with higher power when they get here. I didn't, and I'm really grateful for that. And I respect my brothers and sisters that struggle with the God piece. And the only thing I can say to them is, just keep putting one foot in front of the other, right? Just keep doing it. Just keep doing it. I wasn't hung up. I knew that there was something that loved me that was greater than myself when I showed up here. Had to be. And in step 3, I'll never forget this. This man kept it real simple for me, and he ran me through the steps quick. I don't know about y'all, but I run my sponsees through the steps. Now, we can have that conversation after this meeting about how we do it individually, but I'm not here to play God to any of my sponsees. And the big book's pretty clear that we don't want to play God to our fellows, right? In the beginning, right, these guys were taking men through the steps quick, 2 weeks sometimes. I mean, even when Bob told Bill his 5th step in the house, Dr. Bob the next morning was out making amends, walking around town, right? This is crazy. Did a 5th step with Bill. The next day he was walking around Akron, Ohio, making amends. And so I'm big on let's get these men through the step. So my sponsor, Dustin, had me come over his house, and he had a leopard pillow, y'all. Now, this was some crazy shit. I had never knelt and held hands with another man in my life. And I'm not hung up like that. That's not what I mean. I love my gay sponsees. I love my straight sponsees. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about finally connecting 2 men and standing before my Creator. And he held my hand, and we said the 3rd step. And it was a powerful experience for me in Homewood, Alabama that day, where I turned my will and my life over to the care of God with the agreement. You know, we hear people in these rooms all the time talk about, oh, you know, Tony, he does the deal. Yeah, you know, Sean, he does the deal. You know, Tom, he does the deal. Well, what the hell do we mean when we say someone's doing the deal? What is the deal? Right? The deal is what we say in the 3rd step. When I turn my life over to God, the deal is I say, as a result, you're going to remove this obsession, homie, and I, in turn, am going to go help others. That's the deal. And I've seen men come into the rooms, get their shit back, and stop working with others. And recovery is an escalator going down in the mall, and you're trying to walk up it, and the second you stop doing this shit, you will drop right back down. Be chilling in Macy's. I don't want to be chilling in fucking Macy's, y'all. Anyways, I'm really big on that. There's some interesting history about sponsorship. You know, in the beginning, in the first 100 in the Cleveland groups in 1937, true story, right? And I know that, look, you know, the big book doesn't say anything about sponsorship, and we don't mention sponsorship till the 12 and 12, but we just call it your new friend, right? Right? The reality is it does. And do we really need to call loving your brother or your sister anything after all? But that's what we mean by it. But in the beginning, these guys would, Bill says that the idea was sponsorship was meant to, you would go to the family in the beginning of the person suffering, and then you would get him or her into a hospital so they could, air quotes, defog, right? And then you would visit your new prospect in the hospital, and then upon discharge from that hospital, you would be there to pick them up and to carry them to their first meeting. And when we took them to people's meetings, remember, we were meeting in people's houses. You know, this is where that word home group comes from, right? It wasn't because we were in church basements yet. We were in people's cribs, right? Me showing up with someone was me saying, hey, look, I'm vouching for Alex. If he acts a fool tonight, it's on me. I'll get his ass out of here, right? It's this amazing history of sponsorship, right? Don't take my word for it. Do the research. Look at Dr. Bob and the good old timers. Look at Came to Believe. This isn't me. I've just spent a lot of time reading ridiculous material about this stuff. As soon as Dustin and I did the third step, he immediately put me in the fourth step. And this is what I do with my sponsees. And I give a time limit. And I say, you have 3 weeks. Give yourself a C-, you pass. 3 weeks to finish this. They're like, I hear a lot of shit about the fourth step, and it's usually from people who have never done the fourth step, right? Right? Oh, I'm on the fourth step. Shut up. Don't talk about it, right? You know the guy in the room who's doesn't have a sponsor, and you go up and you're like, bro, you don't have a sponsor, do you? Because if you had a sponsor, you would shut your mouth about what you don't know anything about, right? And a good sponsor teaches CA etiquette. And CA etiquette says, if you're speaking anywhere 3 to 5 minutes over, that's about your ego. Shut up, right? Y'all feel me? I'm not here to hear your egos. I need to hear that life-saving message that's going to save my life. And a sponsor is going to teach me etiquette. A sponsor is going to pull me aside and go, oh, you're not on this step. Tonight, you're listening, right? I had a guy one time say, Sean, you seem to relapse a lot. This is before I got sober. I said, yeah, man, I do. I struggle. It's the nature of my feelings. I'm happy, sad, glad, hurt, and afraid, and ashamed. And he was like, why don't you just try shutting up for the next 30 days? And I was like, woo! It hurt me. It hurt my ego. I ain't gonna lie. I got told the old put the cotton in your mouth, right? Open up your ears, right? And I do this with my sponsees. I give them a time limit. You have 3 weeks. I give them 4-step instructions. We sit down with the book. I go over sex. I go over what I expect from a sexual ideal. I go over what I expect from resentments. What is the cause, what it affects, what is their part. I have them write it out, right? We go over fears. Then Alex is going to pass some stuff around that has, if you have any questions, but by the way, some papers, some pens. And in 3 weeks, I do exactly what it says in Into Action, where the book says this, prepare for a long talk, right? It says you and the new man should prepare for a long talk. Now, I've had some fifth steps that, I'm not gonna lie, have ran 18 hours. I'm like, this guy needs to shut the fuck up. I'm ready to go home. Excuse my language. See, but this is what I love about CA, because I go to the other fellowship and I respect it's about the language of the heart over there. But I come up in here in CA, and this is about the language of the broken heart. And I needed you all more than I needed anything else, right? And and I've had a healed heart in Cocaine Anonymous. And on that day, I always tell my sponsees, you're going to buy me lunch, because it's going to be a long day, the day we do your fifth step. And we go all the way through it. And if you read in the third edition of the Big Book of Alcoholics Anonymous, and I'm a student of that book. Anybody that knows me will tell you, I love our literature. It rings for me. But Dr. Bob, when he would finish a fifth step, he would do 6 and 7 right there at his desk, right? That was his way, right? There was no now you're going to sit here. It's a lifelong endeavor. Anybody who's been sober for a minute is going to tell you, you ain't going to remove any of these character defects, right? Stick around. Welcome to the second part of the first step, because you are as powerless over those character defects of selfishness, self-centeredness, and fear and lust as you were over the obsession to use dope. You're going to need God's help more than ever now. And Bob would do that, and I do that with my sponsees, and I give them a list. I give them poker chips where we write down, what their character defects are, and on the flip side, we put what the spiritual principle is, and I tell them, just pick one every day, and start paying attention, right? And we launch right into making a list, that 8-step list, and we put it on cue cards, and of the people we had harmed, and this is why we don't burn our 4 steps. Right? Stop burning your 4 steps. You're going to need that 4th step, right? And look, I get it. I'm a married man. There's some shit we don't want our spouses to see. At least my first one, I did not want my wife to see that. But damn, now she heard it now. And then we review that list. And I put those 8 steps, those cards, into piles of 1, 2, and 3. 1 is, Sean, I'm ready to run this. I'm ready to do this amends, right? By this time, we're a little deeper into action. If you look at step 8 in the big book, it's real brief, right? We got about a page, which means get busy. And then it puts us into 9. Now, when it's time to review step 8, I will set them down for a long talk. This is where we're at now. And we put these things into piles, 1, 2, 3, like I said. And pile 1 is, Sean, I got this amends, run it. I'm out, I'm gonna do it. I'm ready to do it. Piles with the 2 on them are, I don't feel comfortable about this, but I'm ready to do it. And pile 3 is, fuck you, Sean, I ain't never doing it. Done. And it's okay to have that 3 in the beginning, right? It's okay. Like easy does it. Easy does it, right? Some of my amends have taken me years to make, right? Especially the financial ones. Anybody in this room got any financial amends? Oh, God. Whew. I hate those financial amends because that means I got to put my ego on the line and I've got to make an arrangement and I've got to tell people this is what I got and this is what I could give you and I'm just afraid, right? I'm shot through with fear. The 12 and 12 talks about self-centered fear being at the root, the chief activator of my character defects, and I'm so afraid, which means I'm still having some character defects. But I take action anyways. And if your sponsor's really, really being a Jedi, when our guys show up and they make that first call to us, we tell them, start reading page 86, 87, and 88, right? And I used to wonder, why do I tell people to do that? I was told to do it, so I just tell people to do it. Because usually by the time someone gets to step 9 without them even knowing it, they've been to if they're still my sponsee, they have been doing a 10-step to some degree, at least an evening review. They've been praying. And if you're my sponsee, there's Joanna, how are you? If you're my sponsee, you've been of service to some degree. One of the coolest things I like to do with my sponsees is the shopping cart theory. Because a lot of guys will say, well, I'm not sponsoring yet, It's like, yeah, but what you can do is when you're at the grocery store, you can take the shopping cart all the way back into Kroger, right? It's a form of service. Simple things. You can hold the door open, because I believe AA or CA is what I practice the other 23 hours outside of the meeting, right? Everyone gets an A+ here, but you really want to know how a guy's doing in CA? Ask his wife, right? She'll tell you. Because I promise you, my wife will hear this tape and she's like, you're full of shit. Not really. I sponsor a lot of men and have throughout the years, and my wife has too. And my wife's a badass. Some of y'all know her. She don't take no shit, and I can't be a sponsor like her. But I've heard her say things to women that I'm like, oh my God, why would you say that? One of my favorite stories to tell her is she had a sponsee call her one day, and it's one of the beautiful things about being married to someone in the fellowship is you do talk. I mean, we have this shared endeavor. We've been together a long time now, 15 years, and that is sobriety, even with all the struggles. Marriage comes with that. But she had a sponsee call her one time. He's fucking doing this, and I can't get him to do this. And my wife said, stop, not another word. And she said, I'm going to tell you what she really said. She said, when was the last time you were attentive to his needs? And the sponsee was like, what? And she said, go be attentive to that man and then call me back. And that sponsee called her back. And let me tell you, her man was a glad brother. And but she was happy too, because she got out of self. I get so wrapped into me and my little problems and what happens to me, and thank God I have a sponsor who's like, what have you done for Paige, Sean? You're real quick to point out. I mean, Cody's right there. I call Cody a lot, I get checked. What am I doing for my partner? How am I practicing these traditions in my marriage? And, if you have a sponsor, he'll throw you into those traditions. And I think the steps are a suicide prevention plan, right? But if you stick with your sponsor, he's going to throw you into these traditions, right? And this becomes a homicide prevention plan, right? This is, it goes from, CA has no opinion on outside issues to Sean has no opinion on outside issues. And nothing kills us more in this fellowship than a bunch of drug addicts talking shit about each other. Come on, y'all. Right? But we do that. Oh, hey, you know who's fucking who, right? Why do we do that? And it's great that I'm being recorded because I'm just being real, right? We do that. My wife has a rule, and her rule is the 2F rule. And it is, Sean, if I'm not feeding it or fucking it, it ain't none of my business. And I love that. Where it is my business, if it's other men in the fellowship that are going after God's daughters, and a good sponsor will stand up and go, hey, unless her hoo-ha has the first 164 pages written inside of it, leave her alone, cuz. Right? Good sponsorship will do that. I'm right. There's a reason why our numbers of women are so small. And there's some bad women in the rooms some chicks that will stand up for their girls, And I love those women that are like, hey honey, you don't need to dress like that anymore. But the flip side is it starts with us too as men, right? How are we as sponsors teaching our sponsees to respect God's daughters while they go through the 12 steps, right? And maybe that's Sean's opinion. That's okay. If you have issue with it, you can talk to me after the meeting. But I think we have an obligation. I don't want to be the arbiter of anybody's sex life, but I would like to see everyone get a fair chance at working the 12 steps and having a spiritual awakening. My definition of sponsorship has changed. Dustin is not my sponsor. He was only my sponsor for about 2 years. I later went on to a guy named Tim H. Tim H. died about 3 years ago. Tim was a dear, close friend of mine, and with him I learned about friendship and sponsorship. Because you think your first sponsor, you're going to see him across a dim-lit room, and he's going to be the guy, you're just going to have it forever, and that's just not the case, right? But Tim became my friend and my brother. And Tim passed away. And when I moved to Nashville at about 3.5 years sober, I came up here. And I eventually started working with a little man named Rusty B. And Tony knows him. A lot of us know him in this room. And he's what I had always hoped a sponsor would be. I always hoped that this would be the relation. He's got 30-something years sober, and he's always saying cool shit to the point where I'm afraid he's going to die, and I'm not going to. I even told him the other day, I'm afraid you're going to die. He's like, dude, easy now, bro. Because I want to remember the things Rusty says to me. But I adore this man, and he's been with me now since I was about 9 years sober. And sometimes I hate calling him because I know if I call him, he's going to put the Vulcan death grip on me and hold me for about an hour and a half. You know how your sponsor will do that? But I love this. And, he's always about call me anyways. And you know how you forget how to call your sponsor? And so you just don't call him. And then days turn into a week and you just don't call him. Call your sponsor. It's cool. We don't give a shit, right? We're like, yeah, what's up? What's my sponsor, Rusty, says, what's a big deal to you, Sean, is never a big deal to me. And isn't that the truth about sponsorship? It's just not a big deal to me, right? My shit's a big deal to me. Rusty definition of sponsorship is we are friends who talk regularly about the things that we do to stay sober. And I love this man. Everything he does is about love. And today, my sponsor is a friend, and I talk regularly with him about the things that I do to stay sober. The cool thing is if you stay sober long enough, we all start to sponsor each other. You know what I'm talking about? Because your sponsors don't answer. And sometimes I'm hitting my knees, and I'm praying, I'm begging God for an answer. And sometimes I just need to talk to Cody C. at 1:30 in the morning. Right? We become leaders. Bill called it sponsorship would be leadership. Rusty, for years, you guys know how in CA we say, I love you, right? It's just something we do. Hey, man, I love you. Like, I hadn't known you but 2 hours, but I love you, right? We do that. I love you. Well, I'm telling you, y'all, for true story, for 16 years, I'd be telling this man, I love you. All right, man, I'll talk to you later. I love you. Click, he'd hang up. I was like, this motherfucker right here, right? Hey, man, I love you. Click, hang up on me. Finally, after months of this happening, I said, Rusty, how come every time I ask you and tell you that I love you, you don't say it back? What's that about? I mean, I was hot, 4-step hot, right? Time to write. And he said, as cool as could be, he said, Sean, you know I love you. Might get choked up on that. Love is an action in this fellowship. He's never not answered my phone call, no matter what time of day. He's been there with me through hell. And he said to me, I love you, Sean. And I never had to ask him again. And I don't even say it to him anymore. That's how much value he's taught me about the word love. And we use it so freely, right? I use it in my marriage. I love you, love you. How come you didn't say I love you, honey? Right? Are you being with somebody else? I'm an alcoholic, right? You know how we do that. I got the ism still. So I want to say this. Would you hand me that book, Andy, please? It's a pretty cool book. It's pretty beat down. Do y'all see it? My father died before I got sober, and I really wish my parents could know me sober. I think they'd really like me sober. But this was my mom and dad's big book. They used it in Al-Anon and in the fellowship. They're not alive, but it's pretty rad that out of all the things I have from them, this is the only thing that really matters to me. I thought I'd bring it up here. I wanted to read this to you. So, in our book, it says, if you're willing to go to any lengths, and you want, it says, if you want what we have, before it says anything, then you're ready to take certain steps. And if you go to page 27 in our book, it says that what we have had here is vital spiritual experiences. And I would ask your sponsees the next time you're with them, when you say, are you willing to go to any lengths? And then they're going to say, yeah, go. Are you ready to have a vital spiritual experience? They might go, I don't know. And that's probably the guy that you want, right? But that's what our book tells us that we have had. But if I go all the way over here on page 81, and it's funny because some of us are very Bill Wilson-ish, right? I'm pretty Billish. Big ego, like to think I know some shit. And I need to be more Bobbish, right? And some guys that I really like in the fellowship are more Bobbish, right? And they wish they could be more Billish. You know what I'm talking about? I wish I could be more like Bob. I read more and more about Bob as I get older, and I just love this. I love this man, this kind, gentle man. Bob, on page 181 in Dr. Bob's Nightmare, says, I spend a great deal of time passing on what I do, on what I learn to others who want and need it badly. I do it for 4 reasons. Number 1, it's a sense of duty. I didn't have a sense of duty yet. But addicts are so near and dear to my heart. Y'all have given me a life. Every time I have a problem, I don't care if Kim Jong-un or Putin is shooting a nuclear missile into the United States. If I call Rusty and I go, dude, what the fuck do I do? He'll go, find another addict to help. Click, right? It's crazy. This thing that was given to us, I'm told in this book, is the source to the power that will solve all my problems, including a nuclear missile coming in, right? I can't think of anything. I mean, that would kind of suck, right? But it'd kind of be cool to talk to somebody like, hey, Cody, we're going to fucking die, but it was good knowing you. Step 2, or number 2, Bob says, is it's a pleasure. Y'all know that pleasure in sponsorship. You know what I'm talking about? That just joy. You know, and there are some sponsees, y'all, and I've heard a lot of 5th steps, and I sponsor lots of men, and there are sometimes they call me with some shit, and I'm like, I don't even know how to answer that shit. I don't even know what to say, dude. I'm going to have to run that up the pole, because that's way out of my skill set. And I love them. They say some stupid shit sometimes, right? Some stupid shit. But I said some stupid shit too, right? And they were kind to me. I mean, God, I'm probably saying, I'll probably hear this tape years from now and go, oh my God. But it's a pleasure. It's just a pleasure. If you've ever seen a family reconcile, or someone in the fellowship have a baby, or a woman come in and start sponsoring women, and you start to see her with all these little women behind them, and she's doing it, and you're just like, yes, that's what's up. It's a pleasure. Because in so doing, I am paying my debt to the man who took the time to pass it on to me. If you want to be a sponsor, don't expect this to be easy. This is inconvenient is the word, right? Right? Tony? It's inconvenient. You know, our book even tells us it might mean phone calls at 3 in the morning. I've had phone calls from dudes outside of Rome, Georgia, who have called me and they're like, yo, I'm in a barn right now and there is a dog talking to me. I'm like, mother shit, really? Damn. It's inconvenient. And sometimes it means meeting at the Mexican restaurant on Sunday when you don't want to go and meet with somebody on Sunday. You want to hang out with your wife. It means answering the phone. And it's all worth it. It's paying a debt to that guy that said, yes, he'll sponsor me. Someone vouched for me. And last, Bob says, because every time I do it, I take out a little more insurance for myself against a possible slip. I am not deluded enough that I think I'm beyond getting high again. I believe this wholeheartedly. I see people get their shit back. They get back problems, right? And they stop doing this. You go, hey, man, where you been? Oh, man, I've got all this stuff going on. I can't go to meetings. Man, I can't sponsor people right now. I just got too much shit going on. And I watch them walk themselves all the way back to step 0. And we've seen it happen. And they disappear. I've seen guys with 25 years go out, and we ask them why. You knew the obsession was going to jump on you, and they'll say, yeah, I knew the obsession was going to come back. But I wanted the pain to end. Y'all, I don't know about you guys, but I sponsor, bless you, I sponsor because I'm so afraid of being back in that house with midget again. I am. I'm thinking it's an important note to say this about midget that I didn't tell you guys. On September 30th, 2006, I was off an Old County road outside of Birmingham, Alabama. I'm not a tough guy, and I never have been a tough guy. And, you know, we all like to think we're tough. But I was in a house with some men that had a mine shaft picked out, and they were going to go murder a woman. For $200 worth of cocaine. $200 of cocaine, right? I got out of that house that night. I just hit my knees and I said, God, get me out of this, please. And I got one bar on my little Boost mobile phone, right? And I got out. I don't want to go back to this house because if this thing is progressive, which I believe it is, I believe that it'll take maybe days, and I'll be right back into some form of that house, about to be complicit to a murder. Yeah, do y'all follow me? And I have experienced a big grace by way of sponsorship and the fellowship. That's all I have to really share on sponsorship this morning. If any of y'all have questions this morning, please feel free to ask at this time. And if I don't have, the answer, I believe we do. This is a we thing. Yes, Mr. T. Where's my hot wife? This guy's been hitting on my wife for 15 years, y'all. He did. She had other plans. Definitely not to watch me this morning. Anybody else have any questions or ideas on sponsorship? I need to say this. For as many of us are in this room, we all sponsor a little differently, don't we? And that's okay, right? This is just my experience, right? Do it. Work the 12 steps. Sponsor some men or women. Yes, sir.
How do you choose your sponsees?
It's funny. The question before the house was, how do I choose my sponsees? You know, I think that this is God's economy, and I don't ever get to choose a sponsee. God puts people in my life, and I go, damn, here he comes across the room. I know he's going to ask shit, right? You guys know that feeling, right? And I was told that when anyone anywhere reaches out, that in this case, the hand of CA would be there, right? And so how do I pick? I don't. And my sponsor and I were talking about this day. Here's the other thing is I've never really had to fire anybody either. They kind of just fire themselves. Do you know what I'm saying? They stop calling, you know? And I'm a glad brother. Let me tell you, I'm like, because I believe in page 96, we find it a waste of time to continue chasing a man who cannot or will not work with you. I won't chase you. If you don't want this thing, right on. Go out, get high. Dope is still doing its job. And if a lot of y'all know, people are dying. People are dying. In my professional life, I see a lot of loss. And people, unfortunately, wind up being Instagram posts. We're way more than that. We're way more than some mother's nightmare. When we're gone, the family's always left. Let your family afterward be in recovery, not a family afterward that's mourning or grieving. Any other questions?
One more.
Oh, shit. Someone actually asked a question. Oh, bro, sure enough, dude. Question. All right. Question is, in this time of day, how fast can we finish the steps with sponsees? It's a good question. I think it all depends on the sponsee's willingness and the sponsors, right? You know, I know some people will like to take time. You know, I do believe that there are some basics I need to make sure that my guys are processing and understand. Number one is, do they understand the hopelessness and the futility of life that they've been living it? Do they've got the understanding of that they're bodily different, that they're mentally different, and they have the phenomenon of craving, which is the spiritual malady? Have they got that? Have they developed some type of understanding of a higher power, right? And are they willing to turn their will in their life, if even just for now, over to the care of the group? I will run guys through the steps. I would say that you can do it today within 6 weeks to 3 months. I believe that. I believe that. I'm not saying that's the truth, but I've done it. I have men, I sponsor men with double-digit sobriety. I'm not saying that's something I did, but, you know, they go back through the steps because they're sponsoring men, you know? There's a guy named Kenny. I don't know, do you have anybody from Memphis here? My dude. Friend of mine, Kenny, down in, yes, sir. Yes, ma'am. Kenny and I were talking about 13 years ago about CA. We were dying up here. And we had like 5 people available to sponsor and 70 people in the room, right? And Kenny said, you know what? Start taking those people through, and wherever they're at, let them start to pick up once they get on the other side of the 4th step. Because we all have something to offer. And our fellowship was dying up here. Today, the fellowship's alive and well. You know, due to a lot of meetings at Tony P's house early in the morning years ago. Next question is, what is the best thing to do when you just can't seem to pick up sponsees? You know, I know people who have gone up to somebody, like I was talking to that guy who won't shut up at a meeting, who just spent 15 minutes talking to me, and I know people that have walked up to that guy and said, "You don't have a sponsor, do you?" Grab that individual. I know people that will say, "I'm going to sponsor you." Look, if we're waiting for the newcomer to figure this thing out, we're doing them a disservice. Hey, I got you. I'm your sponsor. What? I don't care. I'm sponsoring you. Call me tomorrow at 9 o'clock. And by the way, here's a book, right? Does that make sense? Take the initiative, right? Question is, can or should I sponsor women? Damn, I knew this question was going to come up. So I have friends in long-term sobriety who, in fact, sponsor women, right? I can't be the judge of that. I want to remember these traditions. Tradition 10 gives me an out on this. I have no opinion on outside issues. Hence, my name ought never be drawn into public controversy. But I promise you this. If you're a brother who thinks you're going to 13-step a woman, you're about to have your ass handed to you, especially if these people are involved in the fellowship, because we won't stand for it. At least I know the men in my tree. Now, I sponsor men that are gay, right? Because I don't believe that they need any help with being gay. That's my opinion, right? I'm not there to help them with that. I want to stay out of that controversy. I know this. I don't, because what the hell do I know about being a woman, right? I can't talk to you about some very sacred issues when it comes to being a woman. And I'll say this. How many men in this room know anything about what it's like to be a woman out there? You don't. We don't. At least in my experience, And I've also in my life have seen that a lot of times men, we're the same. I see women who have been victimized, and I see men who have been perpetrators. And we wind up here together, oddly enough, to heal. And, until we've both healed, I think we need to leave each other alone. I'm gonna stand with that. That's it. I'm gonna end with this. Years ago, my brother died. He was with Tony earlier that morning, and he went and got high, and he drove his car into a tree out here off Stewart's Ferry Pike here in Nashville, off Interstate 40. It was a horrible day. And within 5 hours of learning about this, a motley crew of people showed up at so much so that I had to go to my neighbors. I said, look, some really fucked up people are about to show up at my house right now. Don't trip out. And there were people packed out, and my neighbors were cool with it. And it was the beauty of the fellowship showing out in my little living room to just bring love and food. And it was an amazing thing. And I'd gone to a meeting earlier that day. And in 1999, there was a tornado that came down Charlotte. Some of the locals probably know what I'm talking about. There was a woman in the fellowship who had a big property over here, a big, beautiful house. She had a bunch of old oak trees on the property, and all like 150-year-old plus oaks. And every oak tree on that property got ripped up. Her house was left intact. And she came in and she said, I could have replaced that house, but those oak trees were irreplaceable. That's how important sponsorship is to me. These men and women that we've been entrusted with, they're oaks. Nurture them because there's a tornado roaring through their lives. But what this woman went on to say, she said, what she's learned, though, is no matter what happens, no matter what happens, no matter what happens, say thank you. Say thank you for your sobriety, and you'll be all right, whether it is or not. I love y'all. Thanks for being part of my recovery this morning.